Hello, YouTube friends and family. Welcome back to my channel, my intuitive and experiential wisdom. I have to get used to saying that because I'm going to keep messing up. But I just renamed my channel. It was my name at first, Simbala Dezil, but I wanted to give it a more specific name. So that's what it is. Um, So today I want to talk about a topic, and today's topic is how diet affects our perception of reality. And everything that I talk about, let me just give this disclaimer, is solely from my own personal experience. I am not a doctor, I am not a dietitian, I am not a therapist, or any licensed any of that. I am solely speaking from my own personal experience through observation, from my intuition, and I'm just sharing what I believe. Take it or leave it. And a reason why I'm sharing this is in hopes that it may be helpful to some others in some way. So, without further ado, I will get into the subject. So, diet. And what do I mean by diet? Not a diet. I mean diet like lifestyle, like how you eat. What do you eat on a regular basis? I currently live in the United States. We have something called the American Standard Diet, or the Standard American Diet, and also known as the SAD diet, Standard American Diet. And that includes a lot of processed foods, frozen dinners, processed sugars and flours, just foods that our body has a very difficult time processing. And there's just been a shift in our diet in the last 100 years plus, since the average person hasn't been farming. We are a more industrialized culture, therefore we become reliant on industrialized food. So with that, there has to be a lot of, or there have come to be a lot of regulations, and in order to preserve foods, a lot of chemicals are used for that, and cheap and fast foods are made with highly processed oils and sugars and flours and fats, and these things are quite difficult for our bodies to absorb and even figure out what they are. So I'll just kind of get into where I'm from in all of this with diet and how I eat. I grew up with a very strict diet. My parents were not very mainstream when it came to food. They cooked pretty much everything. My mom, she had a macrobiotic diet, which I still don't quite know much what that is, but it was a very strict diet. And I just remember growing up that you couldn't just like go in the cupboard and get snacks. Like everything was in jars, everything in bulk, it all had to be cooked and prepared. So that's what she did. She made everything from scratch. We didn't have processed sugars, flours, anything like that, dairy, cheese, none of that growing up. Maybe eggs here and there, some fish, but no meat, I mean, fish is kind of meat, but no like red meat or chicken or anything like that. And for me personally, it was this very strict diet because I had eczema as a child, so I had to abide by this diet that was very strict and very narrow in a lot of ways, but I still ate a lot of fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, soups, rices, different grains, like all kinds of things that most people don't eat. um, and I can't say at the time that it made me better, just because of our circumstances. We were, you know, scraping to get by in San Francisco at the time. And so it was a quite stressful situation for my mom. And so that just all encompassing stress environment of, you know, trying to make ends meet, raising two girls almost all alone. Um, so that, you know, I can't take into account how the diet was affecting us at the time, but as I went through school and started coming around more people and being exposed to more commercial style food, so like, you know, Kellogg's or, you know, Pop Tarts or Doritos, like stuff like that that's just like regular for everybody else. Like for me, that was like some novelty, like you can dream about having that. If you're at your friend's house, maybe if you're at a friend's birthday party, you might be able to dip into that stuff, but at home, you can forget about it. So, you know, once I got my hands on it, I definitely was all about that kind of food. And in my high school years, I really became addicted to sugar and candy and just constantly eating candy. And of course, at the time, I didn't realize that I was consuming it like a drug. Like, it's almost as if the candy, the sugar, and I mean, it's not almost, I believe this is scientifically proven that it raises your endorphin levels, you know, just like a drug. If you take a little hit of cocaine or, you know, drink some coffee, you know, it's the same kind of effect where it just like gives you that rush, you know. And for children, oh my God, that's why, I don't know, people have to be careful with sugar around their kids. But I became highly addicted to candy in my high school years, and just, you know, I no longer have my parents to strictly forbid me from eating how I wanted to. So that's what I did, and I began acquiring the same eating habits as those around me, eating at places like McDonald's and Carl's Jr. and Burger King and those kinds of spots. And you know, my skin started just looking like trash. And you know, I think I was going through puberty at the time, so that has some account to it. But something that was happening was that I was just not a happy person, just always like, you know, edgy. And there was life factors that have to do with that as well. But I realize now that the food that I was eating was definitely playing a part in my moods. And I've only recently become aware, like acutely aware of this and how I feel when I eat junk versus when I eat fresh foods. And I notice that my mood will shift. If I eat some dollar store chips, you know, 2-3 days in a row, I will become very irritable and very touchy and almost aggressive, you know. And it just doesn't make sense that a food would cause me to be this way. But I think the main thing is that these things that we call food that we put in our body, because our body cannot process a lot of the chemicals that are used to preserve these foods, our bodies cannot process them, and therefore these foods, so-called foods, create disharmony in our body, and that creates this environment to where our body is pretty much fighting itself. And so it makes sense to me how the disharmony can create irritation, can create anger, can create frustration, can create this dark cloud over one's, aura. And it's not even about like vegetarianism or anything like that, because you can differentiate someone who eats meat from a farm where they know the farmer personally, versus someone who eats Costco beef, or I don't know, Costco, maybe Walmart beef on the regular, and where they are mentally and spiritually. I think it's so crucial to know where our food comes from, and if there's a heavy process, factory process that goes into our food, and all of these chemicals that we can't even pronounce the names, should these be things that we put inside of our bodies? And it's just interesting to me that so many people who have decided to make dietary shifts and changes due to health issues have noticed complete changes in their entire existence, in their mood, the way they look, the way they feel, the way they respond, react, the way they show up in life. There was a man who did a whole movie on it called Super Size Me, and doing a kind of a social experiment about seeing the consequences of maintaining a fast food diet for an entire month, or I don't know how long he did this experiment for, but he was very ill by the end of that experiment. And I really want to bring this up because I think about the human condition, and especially in this country, because this is where I live, in the United States, and I see how angry people are, and I see how hostile people are. I see how fearful people are. Fearful is the biggest thing, man. Like, it's all like balled up together, and then you keep consuming these foods that create that disharmony in your body, because your body's trying to, it's like, what is this shit? It's like, do, cannot compute. So it's like the disharmony, and so it manifests in our reactions and how we express ourselves in the world. We become prejudiced, we become irritated, we become, pissed off at the person that cut us off, pissed off at just dumb stuff, like unable to connect with each other. And to think of how many people that consume these foods that are riddled with chemicals is just, it's crazy. And I know the difference. I can feel it when I eat, freshly grown fruit, vegetables, stuff that, that's alive. Even, meat, something that has been like some deer or freshly caught fish, stuff like that. Like, it has more vitality, it has more life force in it, and the food that you can grow in your garden without chemicals, finding techniques to ward off pests and stuff like that, or just supporting, your local farmer. And unfortunately, so here's another part of this topic, is that the way this world is set up is there are higher ups that like to keep a hierarchy, so certain demographics are shoved aside and left with nothing but what we call food deserts. So they have like maybe liquor stores or gas stations and stuff like that, but a grocery store is very few and far in between. So a lot of major cities have circumstances like this, food deserts in poor neighborhoods and stuff like that. And that in itself is like a form of sabotage, for the people if they cannot access at least a vegetable. I've yet to know of a gas station that sells vegetables, So what we consume has so much weight in how we show up in the world. And right now I'm talking about food because consumption comes in many forms. There are some people that, pursue the path of something called breatharianism, and it's those who learn the technique of sustaining life through breathing and sunbathing. I'm not quite sure. I haven't read upon this practice. I just know I've heard about it, and I've seen little blurts here and there, people talking about it. But it's fascinating, and there are, vegetarians, fruitarian. I would like to call myself a fruitarian. I love fruit. If I lived in the tropics, I could probably eat primarily and solely fruit all day, and maybe like some rice and beans in between, but maybe tortillas, but like mostly just fruit. Anything that can drop from a tree and just bust it open, just eat it up, that will make me happy. And yeah, there's different food customs from all over the world, and I just know that I know in my spirit, and for me, this is my truth, that our food and the energy that it carries is transferred into us when we consume it. So that includes like when you go out to eat. Who's cooking your food? What energy are they emitting that day? Are they having a good day and they are passing that food on to you? When that cow was put down to be your meal, was it done in a peaceful way? When those vegetables were grown for your salad, were they sprayed with chemicals? Were they grown with genetically engineered seeds? Those bag of chips, what is in that dye that makes them red? What is in that salt that makes them seemingly taste so good but also addictive? It's really, really easy to eat junk and fast food because it's so readily available. It's everywhere. It's not, and it's easy. It satisfies our taste buds in a way that tricks our minds into believing that we're being nourished. It's crazy. And then, all these overly flavored, artificially flavored foods really destroy our ability to taste real foods. The natural salts in vegetables, we oversalt things here in the United States. And salt, sodium, the issue with sodium in this country, a lot of people consume way too much sodium. They're dealing with hypertension, diabetes, too much sugar. And again, it's with the chemicals as well. So I just wanted to share that. I truly believe that in order to be clear in our minds and to be able to look at the world objectively, it's important to take into account what we are consuming, what kind of things we are putting inside of our body, what kind of foods we are putting inside of our body. Are we creating disharmony in our body by consuming foods that our natural cells do not recognize and are in a fight with themselves, trying to either merge with this food or be rid of it? And if these foods don't cause cancer in one's body, they can cause a cancer in a different way with how they show up in the world, as I said before, in their attitude, in their way of being with others. Food is, in my assumption, is supposed to be a joyous thing. It's supposed to bring people together. Like, I love to eat. I love food. And I love to share food. I love to cook for people. And I want the food that I share with people to make them feel good and to make them want to express that good feeling outwardly. So expand, it's about sharing love and expanding it. And but when we consume food that is lifeless, filled with chemicals, meat that was produced in a barbaric way, in a torturous way, where animals had to suffer for that meal to come to be, dairy that is, just industrial food. And this is absolutely no judgment on how people eat in this country, because honestly our options are slim, and especially depending on where you're living. If you are someone who lives in a food desert, or if you are someone who does not necessarily yet have the education about what foods might be better to lift your spirits versus foods that will bring you down and bring down your health as well. I just want to make this video to inspire people to think about these things and think about what we are consuming, what are we putting in our bodies, and to try to really see the difference of how we feel when we consume an orange versus a bag of Dorito chips, when we drink some water or even apple juice versus Coca-Cola. When, feeling the difference of these things, when you have meat from your farm buddy down the road versus Walmart industrial meat that's been shipped to China to be packaged and then shipped back to the United States to be consumed. Like, you don't know what the heck has happened in that whole process of that meat. And then there's the affordability factor of it all. How we consume these chemicals which trick us into thinking we're full, but we're not, so we eat more and we eat more. And so then we end up spending the same amount on this crap that we would on a regular amount of healthy food, or just living food that you know what's in it, and you know your body can process it. Water too. Water, unfortunately we live in a world where our water is highly contaminated, and we can't just go to the stream and get water. So these are all things that I believe really can affect our mental stability, our perception of reality. It is my belief that a lot of these foods actually make us quite not only angry but docile and compliant to the status quo and to the powers that be. And that might be getting far too into conspiracy theory territory, but that is my belief, along with the fact that we are a highly medicated society in this country, and that with the chemical foods and drug addiction problems that we have in this country, I do feel that collectively our minds are warped, our spirits are warped, and we're not in our right mindset. It's like we're not all here because we've been consuming things that are not in harmony with our natural human bodies. So that's just my take on it, on how food affects our perception of reality. I'm sure I'll have more to add to this later, or I'll maybe make another video later if I can think of other things to add to this. So thank you for coming to my channel and checking out what I have to say, and I hope that you come back again, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.